Hi, good morning. 大家早好. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I was just having some brief conversations with Jeff. And this presentation actually was a presentation for the IMDA. For the IMDA is the Infocom Media and Development Authority here in Singapore for their Digital Day. So, you know, decentralization is one of the biggest themes that drives the blockchain revolution, right? So, blockchain is, starting with Bitcoin, is forming a new kind of data architecture altogether for the entire world. Okay, so this revolution with how data is stored, how data is communicated across computer networks is a very, very significant revolution that's going on our time, right? So if we think about how Bitcoin works, right? They call it the distributed ledger, which is that all the transactions that have ever happened since the beginning of time for the start of the Bitcoin network is stored on every single node of the system, right? So this is why they call it a decentralized network. So the properties of this network are that you cannot change what the truth was at a previous period of time, right? So that is actually a very simple, seemingly simple property of these kind of networks is that once a transaction is recorded, it cannot be changed again, right? And there is one source of truth for the entire network. So this is what they call consensus, right? So consensus means that out of an entire global network of computers, out of a global computer network of systems, everyone is agreeing on one state of what the truth is, right? So this is particularly important with currency systems. From there, we have all sorts of different other properties that are emerging now. So, clicker is not working. Can you go to the next slide? So this is me, very briefly. Blocks is a research startup. We focus on blockchain market research. We look at the technology. We also invest in digital tokens. Decentralize is a blockchain conference that happened early April, just 2 months ago. And we brought together a lot of world-class blockchain teams to Singapore to present sort of the projects that they were working on, right? And we can talk a little bit about what kind of projects are going on in the blockchain space. So I used to be in finance. I used to be a Goldman Sachs trader. I did some time with the GIC as well. I was trained as a mechanical engineer. And I was very lucky to have invested in the Genesis block of Ethereum. So this was in 2014, right? And that was where my entire blockchain journey started, where I actually was doing research and read the white papers, both the white paper for Bitcoin, which is actually only 9 pages long, but it describes the blockchain in a nutshell. And if you're brave enough and technical enough to read the white paper, you should, right? You should read it from the horse's mouth, from Satoshi himself, what the blockchain is. Okay, so beyond that, I advise Oru, which is a social media network for social good. They are launching a token. And I also invest in a variety of token projects. This is Decentralize. This is Meltem Demirors. So we had a lot of great projects, speaking of Decentralize. All of the videos are freely available on decentralize.sg. I can show you the URL later. So, like I said, blockchain is a database where you can only add data, right? You cannot change what the data had before. So the data that is added to the blockchain as well is not the entire chunk of data. It's not like the entire hard disk is on the blockchain, right? What it is a fingerprint of the data. If you change 1 byte out of the entire gigabyte of data, the hash, which is only a string of letters, that entire string changes, right? So what the blockchain is actually trying to record is the integrity of the data and not the data itself. This is an important point as well. So actually, the blockchain and the whole Bitcoin thing is a merger of different technologies, right? Cryptography is the way of hiding secrets on the internet. So when you are typing in your credit card details, like sending it to Amazon, all of that is encrypted, right? All of that is secured through a secure channel. And these technologies, combined with distributed systems technologies, with the actual way of proof of work from Satoshi, all of these has combined to create the blockchain systems that we have today, right? So it's actually the merger of several different threads of technologies. So the big deal here is that currency systems, digital tokens, are now interwoven with software, right? And these software systems are distributed software systems, right? So we have, say, if you can think about it, there's actually I'll give you one example. It's called Mastodon. Okay, so Mastodon is a decentralized Twitter, right? So you can't just shut down a central server and have the entire system go down. Because of the way in which the information is distributed, we have very different properties into the network. Most importantly, it's extremely resilient, right? You can't just destroy one server and have the entire system going down. So we have essentially an uncensorable way of distributing information, right? And a very, very secure way of distributing information. So the important point about programmable money is that it interfaces with the software natively, right? So the tokens are now interwoven with the code. You can have microtransactions, right? So microtransactions are things like if you're looking at a website, the website can track, right, where your cursor is, what you're clicking on how much time you're spending on a certain page. And it can log all of this information and attribute, say, incentive systems, right, to how much time, say, you are spending and looking at an ad, right? So you can do these transactions at very, very low transaction costs, right? So you can pay you at 0.0001 kind of Bitcoin per millisecond. So these are the properties that make it possible for entirely new systems and new software systems. So this maybe is a little bit too technical now, but there are different types of networks, different types of blockchain networks as well, right? So the Bitcoin network is what's called a public network, right? So in a public network, you have people who are able to contribute and lead. So you have people who can join and leave the network freely, right? And their incentive for being part of the network, contributing hardware resources to the network, is on getting rewarded, right? So they get rewarded in Bitcoin. So this is what incentivizes people to join the network and participate in the network. So this is the real genius of this thing, right? It has this kind of viral effect. So you essentially you're releasing software into the world, and you're enabling for these incentive systems enable for people to participate in the network of their own free will, right? And nobody really owns the software, so therefore you can't go to one person and just shut it down. And with public systems, it eventually evolved to Ethereum, right? So Ethereum happened in 2014. Okay, Vitalik essentially merged a programming language on top of the blockchain. So this created what we call the smart contract. So essentially, what happened now is a way to automate contracts on the distributed web, right? So let's say if I'm renting a smart home from you, right? I have this agreement to pay you in cryptocurrency. We all agree on this contract. Remember, as I said before, this information is now distributed to all the nodes in the entire world, right? So everyone knows that I made an agreement with you. So all of this now can be automated. If you think about how a system like that would integrate on a smartphone, and you have a RFID sort of key scanner in your smart home. So all of that can now integrate, right? So this is what they call a smart contract. So a smart contract essentially is a way to execute a real life contract secured in code on the blockchain system, right? So this is actually one of the true revolutions of the blockchain system is that one analogy I would give here is that Bitcoin was a bit like a calculator, right? So a calculator does one thing very well. You can do all sorts of mathematical applications on the calculator. But then if you put a programming language, it means you can type in code, you can create your own programs on the blockchain. You have a completely different system altogether. So this is what Ethereum was. So if Bitcoin is like a calculator, Ethereum is a little bit like a smartphone, right? So a smartphone can do a lot of things, right? You can surf the internet on this thing, you can use it as a calculator, use it as an alarm clock, right? So it's only limited to your imagination as to what you can do with these kinds of platforms, right? With the properties of the blockchain. So the sharing of resources, right, is very important with all of this as well, right? So in a software system, so if you think about Uber, right? Uber is a good example, right? So what is happening with Uber is that the car is being shared amongst all the different riders, and all of this is being intermediated by software. The Uber app logs where each driver is, right? It logs where the customer is. It's facilitating the communication between Google Maps, the driver, the user, you know, and all the interactions that go on between all of these things, right? So this is along the lines of what Mark Andreessen, which is a very famous software investor, said, that software is eating the world, right? What that actually means is that software is mediating a lot of the things that people used to do. So there are some projects that are currently under development about sharing computer resources. So again, with the revolution of the token, what does the token do? The token measures value, right? And the token is embedded onto the software. So take, for example, Filecoin. Filecoin is a system in which people can rent out their hard disk in order to get rewarded for this, right? So this is also happening with Golem, which is a way of, in a sense, renting out your CPU capabilities to this entire network. And then we have things like MediLOT, which is a medical healthcare data blockchain project that is based in Singapore. And what they're actually trying to do is to create a healthcare economy altogether. So you have people so this is actually what they call an EHR solution. It's an electronic health record solution. So if you see a doctor in a private setting versus a public setting, those medical records cannot be ported from one doctor to another, right? So what MediLOT is trying to do is to put all of those health records on the blockchain so that the data is owned by you, right? So this is what they call with the issue of self-sovereignty of data, which is another very profound issue that will take a little bit longer than 15 minutes to explain. But essentially, it's putting the user in the center of the data revolution. So imagine you wanted to move all of your data from Facebook to, say, the new kind of decentralized social network. How would you do that? You can't actually really do that because Facebook doesn't allow you to do that. It's actually Facebook that owns the data. You don't own the data, right? So this is in some sense, part of the revolution that is going on in the blockchain. So with data, we are moving towards a really kind of data-centric world, right? So data is the fuel that is going to drive the economy. Data helps businesses, it helps governments predict, right, events that go on into the future. It helps organizations develop solutions better. So with MediLOT, they are building a lot of different other kind of applications based on this healthcare data with predictive analytics with their health. But Jiang Wei is going to fill you in later on MediLOT. But it's a very promising project. And it's based around the tokenization of healthcare data, right? So MediLOT is also a very interesting, one good example because they are actually using two blockchains, right? So one blockchain is a hyperledger where they're using it as a database, and then they're using Ethereum as for the token. So you can see the two, in some sense, the two applications of blockchain with this project. So like I said, there is one source of truth, right? So in a supply chain, you think about how a product moves from raw materials to a factory, to the retailer, to the consumer. What if all that information could be captured in one blockchain, where there was one source of truth, where you knew, where your iPhone was manufactured, or where the material came from, or when did it arrive at the warehouse, and so on and so forth. And you think about, let's say you're eating something, right, and you want to check where this fish was caught, right? So now all of this is really made possible with the blockchain, right? Again, remember that this coordination issue of large amounts of information across very, very wide distances, very, very far apart geographical distances, is a very, very difficult problem to solve, right? And just checking the integrity of the network is something that the blockchain does very well. Okay, so blockchain, the projects that go on are of a rather different kind of flavor to the ethos of what we think is business today, right? The business today is very much driven on a profit kind of centered model where the company is raising prices and consumers are paying more for those prices, and they're trying to basically profit maximize. But in many cases of these blockchain projects, they're actually building shared commons or shared resources where everyone has a sort of a stake in the network and everyone gains from the growth of this network. Right? So this is one of the big differences with blockchain projects, and not just in the technology of it, but the ethos of it, or why people do what they do. It's a very, very important part about the blockchain story. So tokenization actually is becoming to be a little bit of a way in which companies raise capital, right? So in this sense, blockchain and the cryptocurrency story is also disrupting venture capital. Right? So how companies scale, how companies raise money, who are they raising money from? Right? So the blockchain or the cryptocurrency story enables from anyone out there with a good idea and a good skill set in coding these softwares to sell you a token, right? It doesn't matter where you are on the planet. You can live in Africa. As long as you have an internet connection, you can buy this token, right? So it's kind of like an IPO, but now they call it an ICO, which is a rather unfortunate way of saying it. But essentially, this is again the story of disintermediation, which is cutting out the middleman, right? So smart contracts, I said briefly, which is about automation of business logic on the blockchain. Disintermediation. So I think the last point, I think I may be running out of time here. 5 minutes left. Okay, so I have some time. So let's talk a little bit about the future, right? We know that we are moving into the fourth industrial revolution here, and that we have a lot of other different types of technologies, such as AI and IoT. So I think one very important theme here is about the convergence of these different types of technologies. So the metaphor I would use here is almost like, and this probably sound like a science fiction novel, but actually we are going to be entering into an age that's very much like science fiction. So think about, so when I was in the United States, I had the chance to look at some sustainable buildings, green buildings. So what these buildings are actually buildings that are very energy efficient, right? So say when sunlight is hitting on the building, right, the heating system automatically goes down. So less heating is required, right? So the entire building is sensing how many people are in the building, like where they're moving. So it's responding as a system, right, to the environment. And you think about how the human body works as well. This happens all the time, right? When you're in a cold room, your body automatically heats up, the other way around. So in a sense, IoT, or this Internet of Things revolution, where you have all these different sensors that are in a room that integrate on a software side onto one system, it's kind of like the way in which the cyber organism or a cyber system integrates with the real world. It can sense the real world, right? Now, all of that data is going into a machine learning or artificial intelligence system where it's able to predict certain trends or certain movements in which the requirements of the cyber organism requires. And then you have the blockchain, which is kind of like the circulatory system for value within this cyber organism, right? So if we think about the MediLOT example, the token is actually acting as kind of like a red blood cell, right? Moving data from one point to another. It's transferring information from one point to another. So in short, I think the integration of blockchain and AI and IoT will be really profound, right? So you think about very highly responsive systems in which, so think about it as so again, back to the Uber example. You could think about the entire Uber network as a kind of giant cyber organism, right? So let's say it's raining in some part of Singapore, right? How does the entire system respond to the environmental conditions of Singapore as a whole? The blockchain network will enable for other types of systems to respond in these ways, in ways that really integrate the real world very well. So, well, this slide was actually about businesses, but I think just to end off here, I see a lot of young people in the room. I see a lot of different mix of business people here. But there are a lot of resources out there to learn more about blockchain, and a lot of them are open source. So it's a wide open space that is really only limited by your imagination, your time, and your energy to look into. So this is me. Feel free to email me. These two websites, so Decentralize.sg is the conference that I ran in April, myself and some other partners. And the YouTube videos are all on there as well. And this is my website. Thank you so much.